Welcome back, guys, to another video. Today we are going to look over perspectives of crime and deviance. We'll be looking at the functionalists, the Marxists, and the interactionists, all the theories that came from those mainstream theories. And get a view into crime and deviance within the Caribbean. We also have our Jamaican own Dr. Herbert Gayle, which he talks about structural violence, and so we'll be getting into that shortly. Um, we're just gonna do a quick run through because it's pretty easy to like articulate the perspectives of crime because knowing the theories from unit 1 and even our knowledge within unit 2, we can easily understand exactly what the theories are saying and what they're positing or postulating, and what we need to understand from it. So it's all about using the knowledge from the theories, what it's about, what the theory is about, and putting it into your essay and using it to answer the questions. So starting off with the functionalists, this is um Emil Durkheim, and so Durkheim talk about the essential nature of deviance. He argued that as society grows more complex, it becomes less effective to control people, which results in deviance. He talks about how social order, it depends on the value consensus, and that this is the shared norms and values that are in society, and we learn these values through socialization from the family and even education as well, family and education. And so he talks about how deviance is a behavior that disrupts the consensus as well. But the thing about Durkheim is that he posited that since deviance exists in all societies, it must hold functional significance. So that's really what the theory is about. Is they're talking about how if the fact that it exists within society over time, then it must have some function. It must be functional. It must benefit someone or maybe something in some way. So that's really how the functionists are looking at it. He also said deviance contributes to social order by reinforcing societal norms. Media reports on deviance and the corresponding punishments serve to educate the public by reaffirming society's rules. Um, and he talks about how it challenges people present views by offering new patterns and behaviors. For example, you could look at the civil rights movements, but then they were seen as deviant behaviors that challenge the 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 notions of segregation in 1940s in the US as well. So you see that deviance would have a lot of positive results, or it would be functional as well, because labor rights and all these things, if the black movement, yes, it considered deviant, but at the end of the day, it led to what? Freedom of the blacks. It led to liberty and all type of things. So that's what they're really looking at. So the main tenants, so Durkheim, he argues that some form of deviance can bring about positive change. And as we mentioned, we talk about movements, black, especially black movements, Pan African movements and all these things, they would lead to like a lot of liberty, a lot of changes within society that positively um helped out the blacks. When deviance is punished, it reaffirms currently held social norms, thus ensuring social order. That's very true. Deviance contributes to social changes because it offers alternative definitions to what is right. Deviance can act as an early warning system that part of a society is malfunctioning and is in need of social engineering. So, like maybe crime analytics or maybe some demographers might realize that this part of the population of the country is you have a lot of youth violence, or maybe this area have a lot of youth violence. That's an indicator that, listen, some social structure isn't right there, whether it be the family or education itself. And so it acts as an early warning system, because once we're able to see some of these signs or these signals, the country has to quickly act on it to ensure that there are not no further damages to the structure of society, because you understand the effect, the effectiveness of how deviance can destroy a nation, can lead to enemy, destroy a society, and all type of things. He also said deviance provokes collective outrages and therefore social integration and solidarity against outsiders such as criminals. Which is we can see this because, well, let's say a lot of times you know that there's a movement for no violence against women. Um I remember even when in Jamaica, when a child, there were a man who was going around killing children, right? And so I believe he was also raping them as well. And so there was a collective outrage happening, because almost you could say everybody in the country was looking for this man, searching for him. So you see, we're brought about social integration, right? There was a collective outrage. People wanted justice. The whole country came together and decided that, all right, then I'm go hunt down this guy. I'm go find him because he deserving punishment. What he did, the crime he did was wrong, and you see how it would bring about integration as well. Deviance and its punishments are part of the secondary socialization process, in that they reinforce what counts as acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And we went through this when we were looking at like the social construction of deviance. Now for the critics of the theory. So Durkheim, right? He doesn't explain why some groups are more prone to deviance than others. Like, why is it that perhaps boys from the lower class are prone to deviance than those of the middle class, right? Some type of deviants are never functional nor beneficial to society, which is very true, because you try and make an essay about how murder, child abuse, rape, how that is like functional in any way. You try and do it, but just not gonna work out. He underestimated the degree of conflict in society and exaggerated the importance of consensus in society. Crime can be cause Crime can cause people to withdraw from society, not come together. But yeah, that is true. A lot of people, due to the crime rate, people, especially in those lower income places, like, is more of a fear as well. People have fear of the likes of, all right, let's come together and get rid of the criminal, because within the societies, members know who the criminals or the gunmen are. They know who they are, but they're not going to um like come together and say, all right, they get rid of them and so on. And most because of fear. And because of crime, a lot of people decide, say, all right, they're gonna either move out from the society or move out from the country itself. So it's very difficult to say that crime would bring people or cause integration. They can fail to see the degree of power an individual has to commit crime, which is very true. Someone can't really, if the law won't allow you to use a social issue as a proper excuse as to doing the crime, can't kill somebody and say it's because like some political something, or because the society now move right, and no excuse. So yeah, we understand the functionist mainly talks about how, like, the essential nature of deviance. They talk about how it have functional significance as well. and they're most looking at how because it exists over time, then it must have some function. And the critics of the theory, well, we understand the critics because they're not really explain certain things properly. It's more of a that the functionists tend to keep things utopian. Uh-huh. They don't necessarily look at everything at a radical view. So moving on to string theory. So let's so Robert Merton argued that deviance is an inherent part of a functioning society. But the thing is that he expanded on Durkheim's ideas by developing string theory, which notes that access to socially acceptable goals play a part in determining whether a person conforms or deviates. Because like society tell us to go and achieve certain goals, like buy an expensive car, get a house, get a mansion, get all type of things which the average man can't afford. And that's the thing now. So when people are unable to achieve these things, they find some way of going about life, whether deviantly or illegally. Deviantly or illegally, to be honest, right? Because even though well, in Jamaica there's a trend of post before beast, it's going viral on social media and so on, and it pretty much talks about like how the culture is being shifted. It talks about how materialism is having an impact on the culture because people are saying house beast before house, and they're referring to beast as cars. Being that cars can, if you have a car, they can go anywhere. Yeah, it's a status really. It's really for status, and it talks about how the values that are in societies they are being changed. And yes, you could say it's because of the younger generation, because the older generation now really say them things there. So you could try and not necessarily blame, but say the younger generation, which it would happen because remember, generation gap, things have changed. So this shouldn't surprise anybody. Um Merton, okay, so Merton theory differs somewhat from Durkheim's in that he argued that the real problem is not created by a certain social change, as Durkheim proposed, but rather by a social structure that holds out the same goals to all members without giving them equal means to achieve them. So that's really how they break it down. Now let's look at so Merton he defined like 5 ways that people respond to this gap between having a socially accepted goal but not socially accepted way to pursue it, right? Yeah. So for conformity now, right? It's really about how like those who conform choose not to deviate. They pursue their goals to the extent that they can, choose socially acceptable means, right? So they decide that all right then they have a plan as to what they want and decide that they're not going to do any crime to achieve it. Innovation, it's about how people uses illegitimate or criminal means to achieve their goals, right? So they find alternative ways to succeed when conventional paths are blocked. So scamming, even especially during like the COVID time, that a lot of people lost their jobs, and so if you lose a job, you're not going to be making money, right? And so because a lot of people lost their job during COVID, people have to go find some ways, some means in order to do it, which is why during that time, during the COVID time, scamming, lottery scamming was booming. Right, it was booming physically in real life, and it was booming over song. Like every song that was being released, dancehall song released in Jamaica was literally about scamming back then, because that was like the next career path, and you can't call it a career because at the end of the day, people was using it to make money. So that's how they became innovators, right? No ritualism. So ritualism is similar to conformity. However, the thing is with ritualism, they lower their goals to more attainable levels. So they see that okay, I want a BMW, but because I now can make that much money for buy a BMW, tell you what, I'm gonna just buy a old Toyota and just work with that. So they just ritualize themselves, lower the standards, right? They focus on conformity and follow rules rather than pursuing distant dreams. So retreatism now rejects both socially acceptable goals and means. Some for you could look at like and some beggars on the street have withdrawn from society's goal of financial success. And we use the beggars for as an example because well, a lot of people beg when they can just work. And yeah, you tell us a time, maybe from your parents or maybe you yourself look at someone and say, ever beg, always begging. Like, why not do something? You can walk around and beg. Why not just walk around and work? But what people don't understand is that, listen, they're fully aware of it, but they simply just don't want to work. Working and having that big, rich life, that's not something that they really care about. So them decide, all right, then I'm a beg, I'm a do whatever I'm mistreating. I don't need no financial success or anything like that. Rebellion now. So rebellion speaks about a handful of people rebelling, replacing society's goals and means with their own. So terrorists are freedom fighters. They look to overthrow a society's goal through socially unacceptable means. And so you look at riots back then, riots led to a lot of people dying. And yes, it led to positive impacts, of course. But at the end of the day, they decided that okay, they were gonna overthrow society's goals, society's values. So that's what rebellion is. And so yeah, they're very easy to understand. Conformity, all people pretty much you're either gonna conform or you're not going to conform. You're gonna conform or you're gonna innovate. It's as simple as that. Conform, innovate, rebellion, or rebel. Mhm. Now for the strengths of the theory. So what we really need to understand in like evaluating the theory really. Merton recognizes the importance of inequality, conflict, and ideology to the sociology of deviance, right? He also adopted a critical perspective of the US society at the time and recognizes dysfunctional aspects. So you have to remember that the string theory, it was based on the observation of the US, right? And he recognized the dysfunctional aspect of it. And so he wrote about it. Also, Merton ignores the cultural transmission of deviant adoptions or adaptations. His theory can be linked with the concept of subculture, and this would help to explain how social groups that share a similar position in the social structure collectively evolve solutions to common problems, right? So overall, the string theory is important because it recognizes inequality within the countries. So always remember that string theory, inequality. Now for the weakness, okay, for the weakness, not all members of society share the goal of material success, and so he fails to look at white collar crime, corporate crime, and this is usually crime committed by those who achieve material success. Like why politicians or why big business persons commit crime and the devious act if it's all about material success, right, and attaining society's set goals, then the stranger wouldn't answer why men like these would commit crime. It does not account for violent crimes committed in groups such as juvenile delinquency as well. Merton ignores the cultural transmission of deviant adaptations. We mentioned that already. And so, yeah, that's the strain theory. It's pretty easy to understand. It falls under the functionalist. He expounded on Durkheim's theory of crime and deviance, and mainly talks about inequalities. Now, for socialist organization theory of crime, let's see. It was developed by researchers at the University of Chicago in the 1920s and the 1930s. And so, socialist organization theory asserts that crime is most likely to occur in communities with weak social ties and the absence of social control, which is very true. Like crime is the highest in low socioeconomic societies, or some would call it the ghettos, if you wish to define it as use define it as that as well. So they do happen more in there. It's also talk about how an individual who grows up in a poor neighborhood with high crime rates of drug use, violence, teenage delinquency, um, is more likely to become a criminal than an individual from a wealthy neighborhood with a good school system and families who are involved positively in the community. Which is very true because I think for those who are from the wealthy would most likely commit corporate crime if anything. They can still commit crime, but because they're wealthy, they probably be going into a business, probably go into some, you know, large sector, and they pretty much cause corruption and all type of things. So yes, the difference as well. The disorganization theory helps to highlight that as well. So research into social disorganization theory can greatly influence public policy. For instance, studies have found that children from disadvantaged communities who attend preschool programs that teach basic social skills are significantly less likely to engage in criminal activity as well. So many interventions and community-based programs were implemented to reduce the crime rate, and it did work. Um, Move on to the Marxist perspective. Now, once we are Marx, Marx is gonna come about with some capitalism, some class things, and all type of oppression, because that's Marx. So the conflict theory looks to social and economic factors as the causes of crime and deviance. So the conflict theory, it looks into the causes of crime and deviance within society. Unlike functionalists, conflict theories don't see these factors as positive functions of society, but as evidence of inequality in a system. They also challenge social disorganization theory and control theory, arguing that both ignore racial and socio-economic issues and oversimplify social trends as well. So conflict theories also look for answers to the correlation of gender and race with wealth and crime as well. So the main tenets, well, Marx asserts that crime is an inevitable outcome of capitalism and the inequalities it produces. That would be the response. They contend that disparities in wealth and income lead to poverty and homelessness, making criminal a rational response to these conditions as well. Talks about how capitalism encourages values such as greed and materialism, which are conducive to all classes committing crime. as well. Inequalities in wealth and power leads to frustration, hostility, and also envy as well. So for the criticism, Marx failed to look at the fact that crime affects mostly the working class and not the capitalists. Which yeah, that's true still. They argue that crime is a response to oppressed politics, but they fail to argue their point of in what way violent crime are political. Feminists would posit that they put too much emphasis on class inequality and ignore issues of patriarchy within the society. They ignore issues to do with racism in criminal behaviors as well, you know. And for the Marxists, their solution to almost every single problem is a communist society, right? A socialist system. However, historical evidence from the Soviet Union and current examples from modern communist states like China and Cuba show that these societies also experience crime and deviance. And we're not talking about low rates of crime and deviance. So once again, the conflict theorists, they simply can't escape from that because they're always using communist society as the solution to everything. However, the communist society right now, due to them not giving any guidelines as to how to properly run these countries, then yeah, not gonna really help. And also we put how they blame capitalism, right? But you could look at countries such as Switzerland, which is a capitalist state, and it maintained low crime rates for a long time. And you know that the Switzerland is also ranked within the top three happiest place. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, they're like one of the top three happiest place. But yeah, we'll be covering that when we reach poverty, health, and environment in module 3. Now for the labeling theory. So labeling theory, this would come under the interactionist perspectives. Now the interactionists, they are concerned with how people interpret and socially construct the world around them. They are interested in how criminality develops in social interaction between a potential deviant and the agents of social control. So, starting off with Howard Becker, 1963, believes that there is no such thing as a deviant act because an act is only deviant when an audience sees it as such. For example, sticking a needle with drugs in one's arm, it is not deviant. I mean, doesn't pharmacist do that or a doctor do that? They stick it with needle all the time. And so it is considered to be deviant now when perhaps a teenager injects themselves with heroin in a park. So you see that deviant depends on the reaction of society, right? So Becker believes that because he believes that people are therefore labeled in a certain way, and these labels define people. People label homosexuals or thieves, which overshadows the fact that they may also be parents, teachers, or neighbors, right? And so labels seem to color over the other status of people. And this is especially why famous influencers, they are scared of being accused of something which they would be afraid of being called racist, whether they say you're a sexual offender or something like that, because the thing is, it can overshadow their career. When somebody career is overshadowed, then they can simply lose it in an instant, right? So this is why influencers, they try to not offend anybody, because especially in these times, if you offend someone for the simplest of things, you can offend the entire country nowadays. So they have to be careful. It talks about how the persons who are labeled would therefore see themselves in such labels and the negative characteristics associated with them. So the person would soon identify himself as the label, or in the case of the as a deviant, right? If he perceives as such. Um, all right. You know what? Don't check was performed by Valiant. It's a song. Valiant is an artist in Jamaica, and so what I understand is that this eases the pressure, right, of the education system, as there are needs to be an equilibrium between skilled and unskilled individuals. Because if you're gonna have someone saying dunce and you're gonna have a bunch of children agreeing that, hey, I'm dunce, I'm not going to go through education, you have to look at perhaps how the positive side of that, the somewhat positive side. Because if you're dunce and decide that you're not going to get an education, then you're gonna supply the workforce, unskilled jobs. Say people are gonna fill up those areas. We're not gonna run out of laborers for unskilled jobs, right? And so you see, this may lead to deviance, which is when the pressure on the security increases, because no people are done. They can't work the big jobs and make money. So guess what? They're gonna turn to crime. And in turning to crime, you're putting pressure on the security forces within the country as well. So you see how the labeling thing, how drastic it actually is on society. Now, he did brought about a labeling process. So start about with stage one, the individual is publicly labeled as a deviant. So they get the label whether a junkie, a gay person, or a thief, and they face the rejection from friends and discrimination. There's stigma that exists, and this person, the thing is labeling now, it can affect them further on. So it can lead to them losing their jobs, or they're not even performing so well at their job, which they end up losing it. Right? Now stage two, now it talks about how it after being labeled now, and the implication it had on the person's life, it encourages more deviance, because a drug user turns to crime, seeing as he can't get a job, right? No one wants to employ a drug user or a criminal. So criminals sometimes have this problem when they get out of jail as well. You know, no one wants to employ them, and they totally accept um their deviant identity as well. For no, them just have to go do more crime, because you never you're not trying to fix me or trying to change me, and because of the stigmas, which no one is obligated to change someone or help someone. But the thing is, when someone doesn't receive the help, it leads to more deviance as well. So stage three now, stage three is where the deviant career of the individual is complete when they join an organized deviant group. So um here they are with others similar to them, and they totally accept their deviant identity. So you might have a gang of thieves, right? Because listen, if you not gonna accept another family, at least the thieves are gonna accept each other, because all of them are thieves. Same with criminals, murderers, gangs, right? They all value the same thing, such as doing crime, deviant acts. So in that space, you understand that it's gonna feel like a home to them, right? So you allow organize groups to be created in stage three. Now, stage four now it talks about within the group a deviant subculture develops. So, and this would include beliefs and values which rationalize, justify, and support deviant identities and activities. So, this subculture helps the members by finding ways to avoid getting into trouble with conventional society. So like, for example, thieves, young thieves, they would learn from the group how to avoid arrest or how to avoid getting caught, right? So like an institution being developed here, because being in a gang, it's really like being in school, because you're gonna have our job. You always have different position, higher positions, lower positions, and the only difference is that when you're a criminal compared to when you're a working man. When you're a working man, you get fired, but when you're a criminal, you're most likely gonna die. So that's how you get fired as a criminal. Now for the criticism, so the labeling theory, right? It it argues that the act of deviance is always important than the reaction, and people who commit deviant act know full well what they are doing. They have full self-awareness of their deviant activities. Um, does not suddenly result from having a label slapped on them, right? So even if I tell you, say, listen, use a murder, you have to turn a murderer, you have to turn a thief, or that, like, that not instantly make the person, like, automatically make the person decide to go turn a thief or decide to start murder people. So, the labeling act, a lot of critics is going to get. It underestimates the agency of deviance, suggesting that the labeling process inevitably leads to further deviance, disregarding individual choices and decisions, which is very true because at one side, like I said, that person may decide that listen, they're either going to find help, and if they're not getting help, they're just going to continue, or they're gonna find a group, which leads to further deviance as well. So you understand that the labeling process was had a lot of truth to it, right? Um, so also they got another critic would be that its view that the consequences of being labeled or further deviance underestimate the degree that deviants have. It places too much emphasis on societal reaction. For example, murder, child abuse will always be a deviant, and therefore societal reaction is less important than the act itself. You know, and there are also no explanation as to why some people are labeled and some are not. You know, there's no explanation of the reasons why some people respond to their labeling one way and others different way. You know, so they have a lot. Even the Marxists believe that theory neglects structural factors such as inequality of wealth and power. They see it as an attempt to neglect the fact that crime is caused by capitalism. you know. And so, to conclude, just because someone is labeled as a deviant or a criminal does not mean they are going to go out and do the crime. There must be other factors influencing that person, such as psychological, maybe economical, cultural, social, even historical factors may lead to one becoming a criminal. Now, differential association theory. Now, this is very easy to understand. So, it was postulated by Edwin Sutherland in 1937, and he sought to understand how deviant behavior developed among people, and his conclusion established the differential association theory, stating that individuals learn deviant behavior from those close to them who provide models of and opportunities for deviance. You know, a teen whose friends are sexually active is more likely to view sexual activity as acceptable, right? Someone who is around a peer group that focuses on that mainly focus on their education and books, that person is most likely going to focus on their books as well because that's their peer. That's who they're associating with. And so it also talks about learning about crime. It includes learning the techniques of committing a crime as well as learning the motivation and attitude towards crime. So for one to become a criminal, they have to have learned it. You know, at the end of the day, they had to have learned it. And so Sutherland's theory found support in empirical research over the years, which a longitudinal study from the 1960s. And we know that a longitudinal study is a research method that tracks the same variables over time, often for like years or decades, right? And so what the study identified was that parental criminal behavior. It identified um, parental criminal behavior as the strongest predictor of antisocial and criminal behavior in children, even when controlling for socioeconomic factors like neighborhood conditions and educational activities. So, yeah. So for the critics, so the main critics of the theory is that it does not explain why a law-abiding family having a child who falls into a life of crime. Yeah, it wouldn't explain that. I mean, a lot of times you hear on the news, we see many times like parents say they teach him better and he knows what to do right when their child committed a crime. So like what went wrong. So the theory wouldn't explain that as to why law-abiding families, children would, turn to crime and all these things. The theory cannot explain acts of deviance that are not learned or spontaneous. For example, like rage, domestic violence, I guess. Also ignores psychological conditions that can contribute to criminality because people commit crime for individual reasons as well. We have to look at that. And it also ignores people's personality or the role of biological and psychological factors in crime as well. Now, for the control theory of crime and deviance by Travis Hursky in 1969. The control theory states that social control is directly affected by the strengths of social bonds and that deviance results from a feeling of disconnection from society. Individuals who believe they are a part of society are less likely to commit crime against it. And so Hersky, he identified four types of bonds that connects people to this society. So he first speaks on attachment, right? And this really measures connections, or it measures our connections to others. So when we are closely attached to people, we worry about their opinions of us. People conform to society's norms in order to gain approval and prevent disapproval from family, friends, and romantic partners as well, spouses. So you see, because we don't want to, or certain people, our family, our friend to be looking at us certain ways. So you know what, with us, we'll due to attachment, we'll conform and we'll just follow the rules. Now, for commitment, now it refers to the investments we make in the community. So you could try and compare like a well-respected woman, a businesswoman. She volunteers at her church and she's a member of the neighborhood block organization. Maybe she's a JP. She would have more to lose from committing a crime than a woman who doesn't have a career or ties to the community. So commitment now within the community, it shows the difference. Similarly, levels So levels of involvement or participation in socially legitimate activities lessens a person's likelihood of deviance. And we could look at the children, for example, children who are in like the community football team, baseball, cricket team, they would have fewer family crises, because there's a lot of involvement and participation, in a lot of socially acceptable activities as well. And so the final bond that he stated would be belief. And this is an agreement on common values as beliefs. So he or she will conform to them. An environmentalist is more likely to pick up a trash in a park because a clean environment is a social value to him, right? Um, yeah, and so what I understand is that the control theory, well, it can explain why older people are less likely to commit crimes, because you know that the older you are, you'd have more attachment. You most likely have more commitment. You'd have a lot of investments in the community. You'd also have involvement. Maybe you are part of the community cricket team or whatever back then, and they also have the belief to do what is right. A lot of people they become wise, and so they are a lot of environmentalists, a lot of ecosystem, this, that, and says where belief exists as well. Yes, the extent to which a person conforms to these four elements would represent the extent to which that person is likely to engage in criminal activities. Now, for deviancy amplification theory, this was done by Stanley Cohen, and he argues that the mass media plays a key role in the construction of criminal statistics through the creation of moral panics and fault devils as well. So it is suggested that the media labels or stereotypes powerless groups such as the young by sensationalizing stories about them. This creates a moral panic that is a public fear of crime that is exaggerated and out of population to the real threat offered. You know, Deviance is therefore amplified. Selective reporting creates the crime problem. And this happens a lot. A lot of amplification would take place, especially on like youth violence. A lot of there are so many media articles out there that are being produced like every single day about how youths and crime and all these things. Yes, at the end of the day, it does inform the public on what's really going on, but perhaps it might be amplifying or doing a local stereotyping, you know? Because yes, while youth crime may exist, is it really, it's not necessarily as bad as they say it is. And so that's what the theory is really all about, you know, how they are amplifying the violence and all these things. The subculture of delinquency theory, and this is by Albert Cohen, 1955. Yeah, I didn't add that there, 1955. And so Cohen's subculture of delinquency theory posits that delinquent behavior, especially in the form of gang delinquency, is most prevalent among lower class youth. And so he suggests that lower class boys judge, they are being judged by middle class standards. And so they experience frustration due to their inability to achieve middle class goals. This frustration leads to them develop a subculture that rejects mainstream values and seeks status through alternative means. And according to Cohen, lower class youth unable to meet middle class exceptions form gangs as a response to their feelings of inadequacy. These gangs provide a sense of belonging and identity, allowing members to redefine success on their own terms and legitimizing aggression against societal norms. Gang behavior characterized by its utilitarian, malicious, and negativistic nature, serve as a means for lower class youth to assert themselves in the face of perceived middle class judgment. And so, if we're looking at the main strength of the theory, the greatest strength would be that it is practically the only theory that has attempted to explain how a delinquent subculture gang may be formed, comparing like the middle class to the lower class boys, right? One of the major criticism or the criticism of the theory is that it assumes that while lower class juveniles look up to middle class values, no lower class juvenile can obtain them. Even though there is a widening gap between the lower class and the other classes, it is not to be assumed that lower class juveniles cannot measure up to the middle class measuring rod, or that they would care to do so for the matter. So this theory has also it's been criticized for underplaying rational and for profit crimes that are typical of many of the organized and mature gangs as well. Now, moving on to our Caribbean owned Dr. Herbert Gayle with his structural violence. So, Gayle is a Jamaican social anthropologist and researcher known for his work on violence, especially youth violence in Jamaica and the Caribbean region. His research often focuses on understanding the root causes of violence, including social and economic factors, and exploring strategies for violence prevention and intervention. His work is highly respected within the academia and has also influenced policy discussions and interventions aimed at addressing violence in Jamaica, and beyond. So, structural violence now, it refers to the systematic ways in which social structures, institutions, and inequalities perpetuate harm and suffering, particularly among marginalized groups. Gale contends that in Jamaica, historical legacies of colonialism, entrenched poverty, limited access to education and economic opportunities, and social exclusion contribute to a culture of violence and criminality. Gale's work emphasizes the interconnectedness of social factors such as poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity within high levels of crime and violence. He argues that addressing these underlying structural issues is crucial for effective crime prevention and intervention strategies. Um, Furthermore, Gale's research often highlights the role of masculinity and gender dynamics in shaping patterns of violence in Jamaican society. He also explores how traditional notions of masculinity coupled with socioeconomic pressures contribute to a culture of violence, particularly among young men as well. In addition, he also examined psychological effects of violence on individuals and communities. He advocates for trauma informed approaches to address trauma and promote healing while also highlighting the resilience of affected individuals and community. And also, his research often includes policy recommendations aimed at addressing the root causes of crime and violence. He advocates for evidence based policies that prioritize investment in education, economic development, and social services to address structural inequalities and promote positive outcomes for marginalized groups. So, overall, Gale's theory on crime and deviance in Jamaica underscores the importance of understanding the complex interplay of social, economic, and cultural factors in shaping patterns of criminal behavior and advocate for holistic approaches to violence prevention that address underlying structural inequalities. You know, so yeah, Dr. Herbert Gayle, he's not used by a lot of students. However, the thing is that he's a great Jamaican example. You know, as we stated, he does a lot of research on violence in Jamaica and beyond, and has came with a lot of policy recommendations as well. You know, he's a well respected person within the academia, and he advocates for a lot of programs to try and mitigate the violence or the rates of violence within countries. So we're at the end of the video. I must say it's very long, even though I was wondering like whether I should make the videos shorter, but I've asked for many feedbacks from friends and schoolmates, and they've said they would rather see the video long, because if the video is long, then that would identify that the information would be deep and a lot. So I guess I'll try and I personally will try and see if I can make the video shorter, or maybe I do it in a section, because I did post a part one and part two video on development. So if you reached so far into the video, go ahead, subscribe, like, leave a comment, any feedback you want, anything you may want me to improve on, go ahead and comment, share the video. I very really love if I could actually reach a far more audience as well. And next topic we'll be looking into module 3, and after I'm finished with sociology, I'll be going into Caribbean studies as well and other topics as well. So once again, keep in touch with the channel and look out for any new videos that will be dropped. Hit that notification button. Bye bye.